Yeah, great to be online. Looking forward to catching up today. You weren't doing a poor job, Luke. That was brilliant. My name's Matt. My wife is Karina. We've three young kids. Hudson's 10, Amaya's 7, and Bella's 3. Been the Chief Operations Officer at Life Church now for 5.5 years. So since September 2016. Bit over now. So 6 years in September. And then, yes, we lead our Karina and I, the location pastors for Life Church Everywhere. We call our online platform. We love doing that. My day-to-day, that's really more probably I'd say we do that in a voluntary capacity because my day-to-day has been, so I'm a Monday to Friday role, looking after all things governance, finance, HR, leadership, strategy. So as an organisation now, we've grown. We are running some significant businesses. We own and operate Brisbane Christian College, would be the biggest one. And in the college, we've just about to tick over to 1,100 students. And we've got 153 staff in the school. In the church, we have our 5 church locations, as Luke just alluded to. We've also just opened an early learning centre, Life Early Learning Centre, or daycare. We run before and after school care and vacation care programs, and then what are called Skilling Queenslanders for Work programs. So across the church, as a mix, we've got about 40 permanent staff and about 20 casuals, so about 60 people all up. So that's the day-to-day. I absolutely love it. I'm passionate. So if you'd asked me 10 years ago if I'd ever work at a church, I would have said no, like you're crazy. My background's working in sport. I potentially could have seen myself running my own business, like consulting, but never ever working at a church. So bit of a mix for me during the week, which I love. So today I'm doing a big finance day, paying heaps of invoices and working on applications for our registered training organisation and our entity structure. But then tomorrow I'll completely shift hats and record for Life Church Everywhere on Tuesday. I'll preach tomorrow. So I really, really love that every day is completely different. So that's really good for my personality.
And I was going to touch on this later, but you've already brought it up there, that this whole idea of leading in the corporate sector, like leading in because you had a fairly a highly demanding role in that world, in the sports world, right? And so you've moved from that to church leadership, and you've said a few things there that you like about that, like the diversity of the job. There's working with lots of different kinds of people in different diverse locations. But I wonder if there's anything that you miss about the corporate world. Like, is there anything that you think, oh man, I just wish I could go back, to that and get back into that role? Or
probably a couple of things I want to bring into the church world. Probably the innovation, like especially with technology. So at tennis, we're always really looking to push the envelope with events. Like tennis would be ahead of a lot of sports, and the first to use LEDs on court, which changed. Like obviously, then churches started using LEDs a lot. The first to have Hawkeye on all. Like I just really, really enjoyed the innovation side. Like always pushing the envelope, and I really hope and pray that we as a church, because Jesus builds the local church is actually God's plan for people to know Jesus. So I think I always want the local church to be actually reflective of that excellence and be innovative and actually be relevant. So there's one thing probably that I miss a little bit because budgets look different, but I always want the innovation side. Like we were creating games at tennis, really working on the gamification side of things. So that's one thing. The second thing that I miss would be, which I still get to do a little bit in terms of contract work, but not the last couple of years with some of the changes with COVID-19 and travel, is just the the thrill of a major event. So seeing something from like woe to go, and we run conferences at church and things like that, but the scale we're talking is completely different. So the Australian Open tennis tournament, like literally, like not exaggerating, like 850,000 people will attend. So all of the detail and that goes with that, but also getting to put a significant event on. The plus side on the church side is that, you know, Jesus is passionate about the one. So even though the numbers are smaller, being able to run something really well is actually helps one person have an encounter with Jesus, which I love. But they're probably the two main things. So the innovation side, and then the major event side. And I think some of our team could be a little bit more resilient. Like we literally in those tennis days, like we just work like just normal, like 7 a.m. to midnight, like literally every day, like for 28 days in a row. And we can run a 2 or 3 day conference here, and then everyone's like,
that sounds, everyone's, needs a holiday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
come on, Matt.
So
we got high capacity leaders here. They understand what you're talking about. They're all in people.
Yeah. So I like that. I like it. And I think there needs to be more of that in the local church.
Yeah. And you kind of touched on it there before as well about, you know, Jesus is interested in the one. So whether it's 850,000, you know, or whether it's just one, it's worth it. Like it's worth doing things well. And one thing I've noticed about you, because we've been, you know, connected now for a few years, and this is something that you've always exemplified, is that you conduct your leadership with such a level of excellence, like personally, you know, and then also just in your role, you always bring the very best. And I just wonder why you think it's still important for churches. And you talked about scale before. So there's small churches, large churches, big budgets, small budgets, different levels of capacity of leaders and experience and skill and education. Why is it or maybe you should say this. How would you define excellence in those contexts? Can you just give a universal definition, or does it depend? And then, like, why should excellence why should we have it as such a high value? And why do you have it as such a high value in your leadership?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think because it's actually one thing that's within our control. Like there's many things that are outside of our control, and I'm really black and white like on this, is that you can bring as much passion as you choose to any given situation. You can bring as much effort. You can bring a good attitude. So I think sometimes we get the word excellence wrong. Like excellence is, like you just said, different in every context. But with a budget of $100 or a budget of $1,000, excellence can still be attached. You've got to just bring your best to every single situation. So it's definitely something I'm still working on, but the local church should be more passionate about excellence than any organization, because we're actually, as Christians, we believe that the local church is representing Jesus. And if we actually believe in Jesus, that he actually came to earth, died at Calvary, rose from the dead for us, like paid the ultimate price, we should be fairly passionate about that cause and about the local church. So that's what our lead pastors here at Life Church, and then myself with our team and our whole time, I reiterate with team all the time, unashamedly, that we have the opportunity for people to know the greatest message that they'll ever know, and we need to do that well. We need to do that passionately, and we need to empower others to do that. So I'm a huge subscriber to that. Way better having someone doing something passionately, even if it's not quite to the same extent that someone else may be able to do it. So I'm often in team meetings a cheerleader of like the young person having a go. They might not be ready. They might not have like the skill set, but I think if they're bringing like passion to the table, that I think a lot of the rest is teachable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. That's such a good thought. And you know, it's one of our cultural imperatives at our church is excellence, and it's something that we, again, the context is different. But what I do love and what I can see is that it makes a difference when someone brings their very best. And like you said about passion, there's no limit to that. You don't need to have $1 million bottom line to be all in when it comes to bringing your very best to the table. And when I was growing up in church, because I've been in church a while now, when I was a kid, and churches were still had this idea, like Michelangelo painting the roof of the Sistine Chapel, like. He was a man that was bringing his best because he was honouring God. It's not new. And I was growing up in church, and in my context at the time, the language I used to get kind of spoken in my life was, because the church at the time was, the church building was kind of said to be like the house of God. That was the language that was used all the time. This is where the king lives. This is the house of God. Would you turn up to visit the King of England or the Queen of England, in your thongs? Or with, would you turn up and would you not bring your very best? Would you not, do everything you can to be as well prepared and to be as, I don't know, just to come with that attitude. And so that, I don't think we necessarily, use that same language these days, but I think the sentiment's still there that it's not so much about the building, but it is an attitude. Why wouldn't you bring your best when it comes to this message that is the hope of the world? And one thing that I've also noticed, in your leadership, one of the reasons why I've asked you to come and speak with us is that you have got to be, and I was actually saying this to someone else this week about you, so I was talking about you without you being in the room, but it was good. It was encouraging that I've just noticed that you're a man who honours leadership really, really well. And you're on our board, and we're so thankful for what you bring. But even in our board meetings, you really honour Rachel and I. You talk about our church, you talk about our leaders, you talk about what's on our pastor's heart, and if this is on our pastor's heart, then let's find a way to try and make this work. And, we're not even your senior pastors, but you just have almost like a gift of being able to honour, leadership. And I guess I'd love to hear from you what you think makes a leader easy to honour. And as a leader, I'd like to know this. And our leaders, I'm sure, would also like to know. What do you think? How can I be the leader that's easy to honour? But also, how can you identify in the life of your church or your business when that honour culture becomes toxic, where instead of being an honour culture, it almost becomes an idolisation culture.
Yeah,
because that's happened, and we've seen it happen in churches, and we've seen it happen in workplaces. So I've seen you do it well. I reckon you're probably one of the best guys to hear from when it comes to what leaders, how we can be easy to honour, and how to be careful not to honour incorrectly.
It's a great question. I think so critical for the local. So my context is I'm only really aware of the local church in Australia. So I'll say a few things that I've seen and identified. In terms of what's easy to honour, I would say authenticity. I would encourage everyone who's on here right now watching this that authenticity, especially for young leaders, is very, very critical. So I think I appreciate the sentiment of thinking that I hope that I am good at honouring people, but so I don't do it because it's a rule, or I don't feel like, because this should be the moment in the service where you're meant to honour. I think you honour, so it's easy to honour authenticity, but I also think that you should honour your leaders authentically. It shouldn't be like so
right.
Then I actually think that's when it's real, is when it's from the heart. So to do that well, my number one tip for people to honour leaders well, which is biblical, by the way, it's not like a Australian Christian church has written rule with following a biblical rule, that the number one key to that is being a good listener. So Luke spoke to it well before that. Something that I would say, which is true, I would say, I will often repeat in meetings, and my lead pastors, their names are Jeff and Lee, and I say, I've heard the heart of our lead pastors for X such and such a project is this, because I actually have heard. I'm not making it up. Like, I've listened in the meeting, and I know that Pastor Jeff wants us to do more in reaching people in Brisbane who are homeless, as an example. So I've heard that, which is the heart of our lead process. So then it's not easy. It is easy in a meeting to share that because I've listened. I also listen at times in a meeting where he will get frustrated about a point. So it's not always about positive things. So if I've seen in like 2 meetings in a row that he's not happy with how something has happened or rolled out or a hire that we made, then I can also learn from that and listen and go, okay, the heart of my leader in this instance is that that's not how we do things around here. So I'll listen to that and learn from that. And I think you earn the right to and the ear of your leaders when you are providing feedback both ways as well. So I'll also be the first to say to Pastor Jeff in the right setting is, I don't know if we did as well as we could have in honouring that person who just finished on our team, or should we be making more of a noise this weekend about how we can help our community through our flood response. So we need to be that's part of like bringing our best to the table. Like otherwise there's no point having people on staff. You need to be like bringing your best to those. And I think that earns a trust that when you honor authentically and you honor things that are true. So when I'm introducing Pastor Jeff, which I have the opportunity to do quite a bit, I'm going to say that he's faithful in all that he does and that he empowers others and that he leads others. And all of those things I believe in my heart to be true. Yeah. If I got up and introduced him by saying he's the funniest person you'll ever meet, he's like the best runner, that's not being authentic because I don't like believe those things to be true.
Yeah, sure.
So I think if you honor authentically, that's a great question. So I'm not the right person to have around if it's like what you want to hear. If I send through feedback to someone this happened on weekend. We had 2 people do communion and host who don't do that regularly. I'll send feedback through. I'm not going to, just because there's a written rule, I'll send through feedback, which I hope will help. That's what feedback's meant to be. Yeah. In a respectful, kind way. I think that's really important. I think you're right. We can get hung up with an idolization culture, which I don't think is healthy. And I think a lot of people that are my age, especially male, could probably, we could all do better by listening to different opinions in leadership, not just the opinion we think we're meant to have, because the local church actually needs to make sense to the community. And sometimes if we just keep rolling out the same phrases, then we'll use a lot of church speak a lot, but it won't really make any difference to someone who doesn't know Jesus. Yeah, great. Well, we're going to wrap it up in a minute, mate, because we like to keep it short and sharp. I'm going to honour your time. But I do like to ask this question of almost any leader who I admire and see you've got to work through. And, we've brought you on this call because you've got a significant contribution to bring to our team, and you already do so. And again, thanks so much for everything that you've brought. I always love to find out where leaders are getting their inspiration from. So outside of their immediate context, which is, their current leadership, their current team, their current world, how are you, and I love to find out how are leaders growing in their leadership capacity, their leadership thinking. So I love to find out from leaders what they're reading, what they're listening to, and if they would recommend any kind of book or speaker or podcast that could be helpful today, particularly today. I love to hear what have you been listening to or reading that's helpful in this context? What could we just jump into today and go and get a few quick wins in terms of input from other leaders who are outside of our world? Who are you listening to? Who are you reading? Yeah, great question. I think it's important we're always looking at these things. I think my list will probably be a little bit different to those. So I'm a huge fan of great sports coaches. So we're all coaches, I think the job as leaders, especially on staff at a church, but for any leader who's watching this, is to actually empower others. And I think great sport coaches do that really well. So I'm always paying attention to coaches who are having success around the world, especially with limited resources. So I read a lot of what Ange Postecoglou says. So he's a great soccer manager. I read a lot of what Craig Bellamy says. He's been very successful. So and he calls that systems-based coaching. So I predominantly read secular books. I just, to be honest, think some of the writing is better than some of the. So an author that I really love that I recommend to you is Malcolm Gladwell. So Outliers is a great book. Blink is a great book. The Tipping Point is a great book. David and Goliath. I've been reading recently a lot of Jordan Peterson. Really interested. That's another very popular book that I think a lot of people are reading. And then in terms of Christian leaders, I read a lot of Tim Keller's writing. I really enjoy. In terms of The Art of Preaching is a great book that's really helped me, like around my communication. So there are a few books. I just finished a book called Team of Teams by General Stanley McChrystal, which is an outstanding book. He was a leader in Iraq and Afghanistan. I just enjoyed the book as well.
Yeah, great.
He's talking about the importance of empowering leaders at different levels. I'm currently reading a Gladwell book called Talking to Strangers, which I'm really enjoying. He's talking about our inability to communicate with one another. Particularly, he's talking about racism in the USA.
Okay.
So reading different things. I think it's easy to get caught into the trap again of listening to things that we think we're meant to listen to, because so I'm always trying to find something that I think is relevant for me, like at this point in time and my leadership, not just that I've heard someone else. Podcast wise, mainly like sports coaching ones for me, just to get like a different leadership tip, a different perspective, a different quote. I love C.S. Lewis writing as well. And probably the one podcast that I listen to fairly regularly, because it's an easy listen, is I do listen to the Craig Rochelle Leadership podcast, so I enjoy that.
Yeah.
The main reason I listen to that is I enjoy it, but I know a lot of our team listen to it. So one little tip that I have is that I think it's also really important as a leader to be across what your team is across, because you can pull out nuggets of gold and almost do that leadership journey together. But I mainly listen and read to things for enjoyment and for fun, which I think is really important as well. Like we're not designed to work 24/7 either. So like I love sports, so I do a lot of that. And I love good writing. I really enjoy Erwin McManus's writing as well. The Genius of Jesus is a really good book.
Okay, awesome.
There are a few things.
Well, there's a lot of things there, and that's been so helpful. In fact, the whole 25 minutes we've had, mate, has been very, very rich. You've been able to pack a lot of great, helpful thoughts into that short amount of time. So, I don't know, maybe I'll just cancel the rest of our the next month's worth of content. You can come on every week. No, that was so good, Matt, and I really appreciate it, mate. Thanks for bringing excellence to the call.